All right, fantastic. Today we're going to be talking about a study that appears to show the media is harder on Joe Biden than it ever was on Donald Trump. Is the study accurate? Spoilers. Are you kidding me? Of course it's not. We're going to be talking about that and a real study that vindicates Trump's Tax Cuts and Jobs Act on episode 324 of the In the Tank podcast. All right. Yes, welcome to the In the Tank podcast. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendal. Joining me today, I've got a full crew. I've got Jay Mobile himself, Justin Haskins, editorial director at the Heartland Institute and co-author of the upcoming Glenn Beck book, The Great Reset. Justin, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Donald. Thank you for that very kind introduction.
Fantastic. Also joining us, we've got Jim Lakely, VP of the Heartland Institute. How are you?
I'm doing great. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about Hillary here in a minute because she just released a new masterclass video. Oh. Is it a masterclass on running the worst presidential campaign? Yeah. Is it a masterclass on drinking a lot of Chardonnay when you lose the biggest layup election of all time? Nope. Is it a masterclass on handling bimbo eruptions and being humiliated by your husband for years and years? Nope, it's not on that either. We'll tell you what it's about very soon.
Are we going to talk about that? I wasn't so sure.
Yeah, we are.
Also joining us.
Is it on baking?
No, it's not on baking.
Is it on Bleach Bit?
Yeah, it's on Bleach Bit.
I'm deleting emails.
How to use Bleach Bit? Yeah.
I think it's on how to swing a hammer and destroy cell phones. It's it's a whole
how to install a server in your basement. Yeah.
How to get the FBI to just forgive you when it comes to breaking certain laws.
That's right. Yeah, and throwing ashtrays at the head of your husband in the White House.
You know what we're learning here? Hillary knows a lot of stuff.
Yeah, she does. She's a Renaissance woman.
Yeah.
I'm starting to rethink this whole masterclass thing. Yeah. So it drops today. So check it out.
Chris Talgo, also joining us, senior editor at the Heartland Institute. How are you, good sir?
Doing good. I am anxiously awaiting the Jussie Smollett verdict. Hope it comes in today.
Oh, is that going to be today? Oh, that'll be interesting.
This is the only verdict Chris cares about. You can care about Kyle Rittenhouse. It's all Jussie Smollett.
I'm all in on just Juicy Smollett. Yep.
Awesome. Yeah. We got a couple of items that we're going to talk about today, but it is, nearing mid-December. So we've got a bunch of holiday stuff coming up, but I think we are going to really, really try to have a show every Thursday or Friday if you're an audio-only listener throughout the end of the year. So I don't know exactly what that's going to be composed of or how many of all of you are going to be joining me for all of those episodes, but that is the plan. So throughout the holidays, continue your tradition every Thursday of tuning into this podcast, and hopefully we'll have some good stuff for you. We'll see what happens. So, Jim, masterclass. This is the first I'm hearing of it. What else do you have to talk? What else do you have to say about that hasn't been said already on this podcast about Hillary Clinton?
Well, look, Donnie, you said in our Thanksgiving week podcast that the thing that you were probably most thankful for was that Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton in 2016, and that you will basically smile about that. You'll be 80 years old, rocking in a rocking chair somewhere on the front porch, and you'll smile because that thought will come into your head that Hillary lost.
No matter how bad my day is, no matter how late into my life, I could always tune into those YouTube videos and just smile with joy as everyone was crying with Hillary Clinton losing on CNN and the Young Turks and everything.
That's right. Yeah, that's
a poorly placed watch again sign too. It makes her look like Hitler.
That's right. A little Hitler mustache by accident there on the video version of this pod. But look, so if you guys watch any YouTube videos, I know I used to see commercials for Masterclass all the time. These are videos kind of like continuing education, I guess, but it's basically, thanks for coming to my TED Talk kind of deal. But they get these celebrities to, I think there was one, Martin Scorsese was doing a masterclass on filmmaking. Yes, right. Paul Krugman did a masterclass on understanding economics, which is hilarious. And so
Ramsey did one on cooking. I saw a commercial for that.
Okay, well,
Gordon Ramsay.
That's the guy who knows what he's doing. But for the most part, these are videos that are that you pay for. It's aimed at your typical middle-aged, upper middle class urban Karen who has got a lot of time on her hands and has something to do. So, of course, the latest masterclass, again, it drops today, is Hillary Clinton, and it's supposed to be on resilience. And I guess she's going to be sharing the life lessons she's learned in her professional life. But
resilience.
Yeah, resilience, right? Yeah. So she did a promotion spot on the Today Show this week, and she read two bits of news we came to learn from that. One is that she did not write a concession speech.
Oh.
She did not write one. So that's why she wasn't prepared to come out that night and concede the election to Donald Trump. It wasn't because she was blind, knockout drunk because she was so pissed at blowing this election. It was she just didn't write a concession speech and needed a little time. But she had written, of course, an acceptance speech that she expected to give. So part of her master class is her reading part of her acceptance speech, right? And so this is the part. If you don't laugh at this, she cries, by the way, during this reading, this little brief reading. If you don't laugh at this, you have a heart of stone. Here we go.
I dream of going up to her and sitting down next to her, taking her in my arms and saying, "Look at me, listen to me. You will survive. You will have a good family of your own and 3 children. And as hard as it might be to imagine, your daughter will grow up and become the president of the United States."
Yeah, that was going to be part of her acceptance speech. The context of that, I think, is her speech was going to be like her going back in time and visiting her mother as a young woman, and telling her that one day your daughter will grow up to be president of the United States. That sounds great.
Rip off of Back to the Future. Is the Back to the Future thing? What is this?
Just like that.
Frequency? Isn't Frequency about going back and visiting his father or something?
And so that's part of Hillary's masterclass. So if you want to see Hillary, maybe she cries more than that. I think that might be worth the money. But she also talked in her speech, about it's time to unite the country and all this kind of stuff. We got to remember this whole Russia collusion hoax started with Hillary Clinton.
Sure.
A book came out shortly after the election. The morning after she sobered up. She's probably hungover, and she is telling her team, "We're pushing out this Russian collusion Trump bullshit." And the media will run with it. So she was basically the start of the incredible division in this country after the election of Trump. And so we're supposed to feel sorry for her. And of course, none of these people that are questioning her, and we're going to get into this media bias and how the media is supposedly harder on Biden than on Trump. She still has not gotten a single question about what was revealed in that book and how she started this whole Russian collusion hoax. So, of course, it wasn't going to happen in this media interview, and it will never happen. And that's why we should enjoy that night of that November night in 2016, just like Donnie will do, because it should make you happy and feel a little bit better about the way the media just savaged Trump continually for 5 years.
Oh yeah, well no, that's in dispute, Jim. That brings us perfectly into our first topic. Yeah, because there is a study that supposedly shows that the media wasn't as bad on Trump as you think. In fact, at times they've been harder on Joe Biden. That is according to a new article from the Washington Post. The Washington Post, Dana Milbank, which I got right here. Opinion: the media treats Biden as badly as or worse than Trump. Here's proof. And just to make sure here. All right. It is December 9th and not April Fool's. So this is a real article here. And I honestly think that this might be the craziest story that we've covered all year. And this is the end of the year. So that's saying something. And not necessarily because of the significance of it or anything like that, but because of the pure delusion one must be suffering from to believe something like this. So, I heard about this on the radio on the way in to work on Monday. So this news is a little old, I guess, by our standards. but like it was just so crazy and goes completely counter to a lot of stuff that we talk about because we rail against the media constantly on this podcast. So I'm just like, even though this is dropping on like a Monday, I think this article actually come out the Friday before. I'm like, we still have to talk about this. So I want to read through some of the article. I want to get into some of the details. But before we dive in or get into any of the details of the rebuttal or anything like that, I want to ask Chris, as the person here on the podcast that watches more corporate media than anybody else on this podcast, what was your reaction when you first heard about this story?
I was in utter disbelief because, like you said, I mean, I watch CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, Fox News, like pretty much every day. I mean, that's literally my job to just watch media, pay attention to, to the news. And I was just floored when this headline came out that the media is harder on Joe Biden than they were on Donald Trump. That is so beyond the pale. It's just not even funny. I can't even come up with adjectives to describe how ludicrous that is.
I know. I was lost.
Impossible.
I was lost for words too. It's so absurd. Wait, how do I put my screen back up here? This one?
Oh, there you go.
All right. So I want to just start off by reading a little bit of this article here. So it starts off with a smattering of headlines to set the table to make this case that the media has actually been harder on Joe Biden. So let's start off with some of these hard-hitting headlines. Let the Democratic freakout begin. Okay. Dems start to face the hard questions. Oh my gosh, Biden must be feeling the heat. Does the White House owe Larry Summers an apology? Oh, this is savage. This media is just so hard on him. The other big intra-Democratic fight, no BIF bump for Biden. Chris, you probably know what that is. What's BIF?
Bipartisan Infrastructure Framework.
Okay. White House braces for a bad CBO score. ... Biden dithers ... Biden tries to calm nerves about 2024. And maybe the worst one of them, the case for why Biden is screwed. That is their sampling of these horrible headlines that Biden has had to suffer through during his presidency so far.
Wow, that's tough stuff right there.
It says even the extraordinary news that jobless claims had dropped to the lowest level in 52 years came with a qualifier. But don't expect the numbers to immediately change America's negative perceptions of the economy. It isn't just Politico. My impression of other outlets' coverage of President Biden had been much the same, unrelentingly negative. Was it my imagination? Yes, it was. No, it wasn't, he says. Artificial intelligence can now measure the negativity with precision. At my request, Forge.ai, a data analytics unit of the information company Fiscal Note, combed through more than 200,000 articles, tens of millions of words from 65 news websites, newspapers, networks, cable news, political publication, news wires, and more, to do a sentiment analysis of coverage. Using algorithms that give weight to certain adjectives based on their placement in the story, it rated the coverage Biden received in his first 11 months of 2021 and the coverage President Donald Trump got in his first 11 months of 2020. The findings painstakingly assembled by Fiscal Note Vice President Bill Frischerling confirmed my fear. My colleagues in the media are serving as accessories to the murder of democracy. I'm not even kidding you. That is literally what is written here for those people that are just listening to the audio only. This is Dana Milbank from the Washington Post that literally just wrote that these findings are tantamount to accessories in the murder of democracy. That's where we have gotten so far.
Wow.
Hey, Donnie, it gets better if you scroll down a little bit. He actually says that Joe Biden's economy is doing wonderful.
Oh, yeah. Here's a nice little chart that shows that during August of 2021, that Biden's coverage, according to this study, dipped below Trump's coverage throughout that year, or whatever. So I forget what happens in August of 2021. I think it had something to do with Afghanistan, but I'm not sure. But so that's the contention here. that is the contention that Dana Milbank is making. So, Jim, I'll go to you first. I know what you're going to say. Oh, the media was way harder on Trump than Biden. But as you can see from the passage I just read, the science is clear, my friend.
Oh, the science is clear.
So what do you think?
Oh, my God. It's we talk a lot on this podcast about the gaslighting we all have to endure from our ruling class and from our media. And this is just another fantastic example of it. I mean, you don't even have to do research to just know, because you experienced it, that the media coverage of Donald Trump's presidency was not just mostly negative. It was relentlessly negative. It was almost 100% negative every single day for 4 years. And it's even, when you were reading that Dana Milbank piece, and when I covered the White House, big deal, right? When I covered the White House, Dana Milbank was there at the Washington Post, and he's a decent guy, but he's not even really a journalist. He's a columnist. And this is complete garbage, quote unquote, science. The way this, we're using AI. If this is the best that AI could come up with, by the way, with a conclusion that the media is tougher on Biden than Trump, then I don't think we have anything to fear from like a Terminator future, because AI is way too stupid to take over the world. All right. So while you were reading that, I actually just Googled, I think the term Trump bad headlines. And then I got something immediately came up. Yeah, it says this was from November 11th, 2020. It says today's top 10 batshit crazy biased headlines from the liberal media. And this is, you could just do this all day. Here's one that says, F his feelings, Trump's a loser and his followers are whiners. That was from the Daily Beast. MSNBC's John Brennan. Trump fears Trump could reveal state secrets after leaving office are quote unquote well-founded. The Guardian, first thing election special. Trump's refusal to concede is an embarrassment. Yeah, that's great. Well, that means that the governor in absentia or in exile there in Georgia needs to have something to answer to as well. And actually, the place to go to for like the actual truth on these things is an outfit called Media Research Center. We work with them a lot here at the Heartland Institute.
Okay, fine. Keep going. But I got a couple of good headlines too, anti-Trump ones.
Okay, great. No, but just you can get into those because they have the Media Research Center has a website called newsbusters.org. This is not very difficult to find. We'll actually add it to the show notes. They actually looked into this, and actually their whole job is to track media bias from the left against conservatives or anybody not also on the left. And they state, because they do extensive, detailed human research on these things, and between 2017 and 2021, the coverage of Trump averaged between 90% and 92% negative. And in fact, they've actually tracked the first 3 months of Biden's term and Trump's term. Biden's coverage has been 59% positive in truth, while for Trump, it was 89% negative. So this is just yet another example of media gaslighting. And, Dana Milbank was on CNN and he's going all over the place. But, there are a couple of left-wing corrupt media or members of the corrupt media on the left who have actually seen this report and seen what Dana Milbank has written and are as incredulous about it as we are. To their credit, but they're very few and far between. This is getting a lot of traction.
Yeah, well, so a couple of the headlines that I was able to pull up. I've got Wired magazine. Trump didn't just banish a baby, he banished a mother. Apparently this was something that he made a comment during a rally or something about a baby crying. I don't know. Law News. Trump pretty much admits that he expects servicemen to be rapists. What? Politico, Donald Trump's wrong. Mexicans aren't going to rape you. That's a literal headline in Politico. That we're supposed to assume that there's equally harsh headlines against Biden. I think this one's from The Week. Donald Trump says he'd use ISIS to, quote, scare the Pope into supporting capitalism. It's like, these are the headlines that we had to suffer through for 4 years. And these were just the first four that I found. I'm sure there is a billion.
There are a billion. I mean, hey, has Biden been compared to Adolf Hitler and Nazis? Has he been called a dictator or a tyrant ever in headlines? And he's doing more tyrannical things with these COVID lockdowns than ever. Oh, and here's another great one. Every death, and there was a headline I saw because Joe Biden said this, so they reported it in a headline. Joe Biden says that Donald Trump is responsible for every single COVID death in the United States in 2020.
Yep.
Are there any headlines saying that Biden is responsible for all the deaths in 2021? No, of course not. The media is covering up this report is so absurd. It's beyond absurd.
Hey, Donnie, one other thing that I've noticed as an astute, viewer of media is that it's not just the bad headlines that they were constantly throwing at Donald Trump. It's what they choose not to cover with relation to Biden.
Oh,
so
sure.
it's the air of omission. So it's not that
gatekeeper effect.
Exactly. So it's not that they are, pumping up Biden as the greatest president ever. That's not true. I just think that they're really kind of ignoring him. And still to this day, like literally last night, first thing on every single newscast that I watched was Donald Trump, the January 6th Insurrection Commission, blah, blah, blah. And they don't even talk about what's happening right here and right now with President Biden.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like the perfect examples of those is Donald Trump, using his second hand to steady his glass, and they're using that as like evidence that we need to initiate the 25th Amendment to get this guy out of office because he can't even, drink water, But then like there's stories about Biden and stuff that he might have done in his own pants at the Vatican visit, and they'll just ignore that. But to Trump, to Jim's, I almost called you Trump, Jim. You should take that as a compliment. To Jim's comment about like, have they ever called him Hitler? I've got this piece in the Wall Street Journal that references a gentleman's quote from Newsbusters who writes, how many instances did the analysis find of journalists comparing Biden to Hitler? During a single 3-day period on cable news back in 2018, Newsbusters...
Trump to Hitler, you mean?
No, they're asking how many times was Biden compared to Hitler. It's rhetorical. During a 3-day period on cable news back in 2018, Newsbusters found that 22 comparisons of Trump's border policy to the Holocaust and slavery. Is Biden's racking up similar numbers? I think that, again, rhetorical question. No, of course not. Nobody is comparing Biden to Hitler. Like, not even your, because it says, actually, let's have Dana Milbank do some of the talking for us here. I got a clip of him going on CNN. So the talk of the town when this report came on. So we got to go on CNN and MSNBC. I have the CNN clip here. So let's let him do a little bit of the talking.
Donald Trump's time as president was marked by persistent contempt for the media. Once he even declared the news media the enemy of the people. Not once, but many, many times. Washington Post columnist Dana Milbank writes in his latest column that it's President Biden, not Trump, who may actually have a legitimate gripe with the media.
Oh my gosh.
Milbank tasked an artificial intelligence company with analyzing hundreds of thousands of news articles from dozens of media outlets. And the results here, quote, the media treats Biden as badly as or worse than Trump. Joining us now is Dana Milbank. He is a columnist of the Washington Post, as I mentioned. Okay, first, let's talk about the media outlets. I just want to be clear. Some of these are not all straight news outlets, right? So you're looking at Breitbart, you're looking at Huffington Post, also ABC News, CNN, New York Times, Washington Post. What did you find?
Right. Fiscal note, the folks who did this for me, they cast a very wide net. So you'd get, the extremes and also.
What's that droopy dog from like the cartoons? What's the name of that guy? Because it
Droopy
looks
Dog.
just like him. Is it Droopy Dog?
All of us in the middle to the greatest extent possible. It's kind of what you would expect. It started out for Biden, fairly favorable coverage the first few months of the year. The last 4 months, however, Biden has been at where Donald Trump was or lower than where Donald Trump is in terms of media sentiment. I mean, it's not bias, it's the actual words we're using. So we are as negative as a collective media on Joe Biden, if not more so than we were to Donald Trump at a time when he was trying to overthrow democracy. And I think that's
wait a minute.
Of our whole industry.
Can I challenge you on the word "we"? Though, because these are such disparate media outlets, right? You're lumping the Washington Post, your employer, in with, say, Breitbart or this agency that is doing this research is. Can you tell us the effect of that? Because I would look at like a Breitbart and say they did so much positive coverage of Trump, so much negative coverage of Biden, and that kind of brings it.
Okay, well, here, let's address that, because that to me is like the only thing that this could possibly hang its hat on. It's like, because obviously we know that CNN when it comes to Trump's coverage versus Biden's coverage is night and day. We understand that. But if the contention is that if you flip-flop it and the Breitbart is actually night and day the other way, so when you even them out, it actually comes a little bit closer. And I could bring back up that chart that shows, Biden's little line graph dipping below Trump's. So what do you have to say about that? I'll go to Justin since he's hopping in and out of our broadcast here.
Actually, to be totally honest, I couldn't see how if I was designing a algorithm that would give me the result that chart shows, I could see how you could come up with that result. And the reason for that is because during the Donald Trump era, this chart doesn't measure the severity of criticism, right? This is only.
I think it does a little bit, actually. We can get into that.
But it's not. It doesn't, though. Really, I mean, it's not going to weigh a headline appropriately that says something like Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. It's not going to do that. That's not going to spike the chart, for example, compared to something that's slightly negative about Biden, right?
Right.
So the way that I think that this would work is during the Donald Trump era, all of the coverage that he received from the mainstream press, almost all of it, was very, very, very crazy negative, right? But the coverage that he received from the right was generally very positive, right? And so it's not hard to see how that kind of balances out. But with Biden, I don't even think he's getting very positive media coverage from the press. He is relative to what he deserves, which is horrible media coverage. He's not getting that from the mainstream press. But is he getting, was Breitbart more excited about Donald Trump than the Washington Post has been about Biden so far? I think the answer is absolutely yes. Breitbart was way more excited about Trump than the Washington Post is about Biden. That's because Biden's been a total disaster in every way, based on basically every metric. And almost everyone agrees with that, except for a very small number. Even socialists don't like Biden all that much. So when you think about it, it's sort of like, I can see how you could graph this chart out so that it's like, yeah, Biden's getting more negative coverage. The problem is the underlying assumption is that it's not deserved. See, that's the problem that we had with Trump, is that we had historically low unemployment rates, for example. We had everything was going incredibly well. We had the destruction of ISIS. We had peace agreements in the Middle East. We had all kinds of amazing things happening, a booming economy that we haven't seen in decades. And yet he was receiving relentless, negative, horrible coverage, right? Whereas Joe Biden is receiving basically the same coverage, except we're, have a supply chain crisis and the worst foreign policy disaster in Afghanistan that we've had in, maybe ever, and on and on and on, right? So they shouldn't be even. Even means that Biden is getting an advantage. It should be way worse than even. But I can see how you could produce this kind of a chart that shows that he's receiving somewhat negative coverage because he's not getting the same kind of boost from his side that Trump got from his side. And the reason for that is because everyone knows Biden's a disaster. I can see that. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying it's warranted or that his conclusions are right, but I can see how we can get to this point in the chart where we have this.
So I understand, that they were trying to do a wide net and capture, these mainstream media and some more of these fringe outlets, whether it's on the left and the right. They said they wanted to cast as wide a net as possible. But in my opinion, that it is still lacking, that's still missing major components of what the media is.
Donnie,
right?
Nate Silver of 538 did an analysis of the program, the artificial intelligence program, and what he found was that a vast majority of the stories had nothing to do with American politics or Joe Biden. For example, he cited stories about the Haiti coup, and that those were attributed as as anti-Biden news stories. So what Nate Silver said is that the entire system, this artificial intelligence system by Fiscal Note, he literally said it was complete crap. So I think we have to go on that premise that the artificial intelligence programming is just complete crap. And the backstory on this is that the White House, a week before the Milbank op-ed came out, held private meetings with a bunch of mainstream media officials saying, "Hey guys, you got to go easy on us. You're really killing us with the negative coverage." And a lot of people think that this was, just another ploy to make the mainstream media feel as if, hey guys, whoa, like hold your horses here. You guys are just killing Joe Biden. And great, the Nate Silver thing right there. Yep.
Yeah. So the Nate Silver, he just kind of tore this thing apart on Twitter, as Chris was saying. So he actually looked into some of the data. He says these are the articles the algorithm found out of more than 40,000 stories were the most favorable towards Biden. It's just totally random. Lots of stories about the stock market, many having nothing to do with Biden at all. And there's one of them that he has specifically quoted as Haiti president assassinated at home, wife wounded.
And that's a negative Biden story, right?
No, it's a positive Biden story.
Oh,
it's just so random. That's the thing. And he goes through some of the other ones that are, here are the articles that the algorithm deems least favorable to Biden by contrast. These are a little bit more on the mark, but still mediocre at best. Again, lots of stuff about stock or commodity prices and lots of polling stories about like Biden's approval ratings. And he goes through and just basically says that this is all just crap. It's
well,
just like, if Nate Silver is saying it's crap, then I think it might be crap.
And following up on something that Justin, and we keep losing Justin. Hopefully we'll have him back here in the podcast studio here in a minute. But Dana Milbank, he's just hysterical. I mean, this is crazy. He says that it says here in the Newsbusters breakdown of Milbank's op-ed, it says here, naturally Milbank thinks that the quote unquote mainstream media should have a dramatic bias in Biden's favor, since that's in favor of quote unquote democracy. And their arrogance in dismissing the entire Republican half of America is perennially breathtaking. And Dana Milbank either says or writes, "We need a skeptical, independent press. But how about being partisans for democracy? The country is in an existential struggle between self-governance and an authoritarian alternative. And we in the news media collectively have given equal, if not slightly more favorable treatment to the authoritarians." And of course, the authoritarians, of course, are Donald Trump and all of us here in the basket of deplorables that Hillary Clinton put us all in. We're threats to democracy. And so, that actually gives the game away. You can't get more mainstream corporate media than Dana Milbank. He's been doing this for the Washington Post for about 2 decades. He's been a political columnist over there. And the idea, again, that Donald Trump was not getting skeptical, he was getting more positive coverage than Joe Biden. He was not getting skeptical enough. I mean, for crying out loud, I shared a headline on the screen here a minute ago. It says, this is from the New Yorker, and you can't get, again, more mainstream elitist corporate media than that. New York Magazine. How Trump brought Nazis into Republican politics. I mean, you literally cannot find. It's hard to whittle down the number of articles with headlines in the mainstream media that called Trump authoritarian. And again, he did, if it was reflective of his actual presidency, that would be one thing. It was completely all fantasy, it was all made up. And that, again, is putting aside, as we opened up talking about Hillary Clinton being responsible for birthing the greatest journalistic hoax in the history of the United States, which is the Russia-Trump collusion hoax. That if you just took those stories, because it was all lies. They were lying about Trump's connection to Trump, or I'm sorry, to the Russians, and how the Russians stole the election for him, which was Hillary's initial theory that she pushed in the media, and they ran with it for 4 years. Yeah. On that story alone, he would have more negative coverage than Joe Biden by far, because it was lies. And all of these stories, the tone of them were all that Donald Trump, is a threat to democracy. Google Donald Trump and threat to democracy and see how many, and do it from between 2017 and 2020 and see how many articles you come up. It's probably 1 million.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean, this. I'm glad that Nate Silver. That was the one I was thinking of. Existential threat, right? Well, just Google these search terms. I mean, to his credit, Nate Silver looked under the hood of this bullshit AI study and found it wanting and said so publicly. So good for him. But a lot of people are just taking it at face value. And you know what? When you talk about media corruption, that's the point. You know, you always talk about how the headline or the hit piece story is always on the front page, top of the front page, big banner headline. 3 days later, they run a correction that basically destroys the entire thesis of the story, and they run it on page A22 in a tiny box in the bottom right corner. That, and the point of this Dana Milbank piece and of all of this stuff is to just put it out there into the mind of the American people that Biden is getting screwed over by the press and Trump, and we were too easy on Trump. It doesn't matter that it's bullshit because it's already out there. And again, Dana Milbank talking about, you know, comparing, and Justin talked about this a little bit too, kind of talking about, well, we included Breitbart and then maybe you know, some right-wing blogs and PJ Media and stuff like this. The entirety of the billions and billion-dollar corporate media in this country were all calling Donald Trump an authoritarian Nazi and a Russian collaborator endlessly, day after day, for 4 years. And to compare a story in Breitbart saying that Trump's doing a good job with the economy to this entire machine, this enormous multi-billion-dollar conglomerate pounding down into people's heads that Donald Trump is an authoritarian Nazi is absurd. You don't even have to look down and look under the hood to the numbers to know that that's bullshit.
Well, but if we put aside the fact that it's completely absurd, ridiculous, ludicrous, you know, we can go on forever. I'm more concerned with why are they doing it? And I think that timing is very interesting. Obviously, you know, we're going to be very soon talking about 2022 midterm elections. I think the media is freaking out because they see that Joe Biden and the Democrats are in, you know, a very precarious position. So they're just trying to do anything and everything to tar and feather any Republican, while at the same time trying to, you know, make Biden into a sympathetic figure so that the media changes its tune and starts saying, oh, Biden's great. And Donnie, in that Dana Milbank article, I was just shocked because he has a couple of paragraphs where he was talking about the Biden economy, saying it's magnificent, it's great. And why are we not, like, you know, putting all this stuff, like, you know, in the news? What are you talking about?
Well, it's because
inflation's
we can't buy paper to print it on because of all the supply chain disruptions. So a couple of things. One is so it seems like they did try to compare, you know, the strength of words and use that to weight against weaker words, and that's how they determine some of this with the artificial intelligence. But I also would wonder, again, maybe we'd have to look at the methodology of this, but like, do they compare the weight of the influence that these papers have? Like if my blog is writing something anti-Joe Biden and the Washington Post is writing something pro-Joe Biden, is it just one for one? I'm very curious about that. And I also want to bring up that the idea that the definition of what the media is, because if it's just newspapers and CNN and stuff, I feel like that gives a very incomplete look of what the media is. Because when you've got all of the late night talk shows and Saturday Night Live, and like even it filters into some movies and stuff, these messages of just Trump is evil, Orange Man bad, constantly 24/7, and people, especially like, you know, my generation and younger, are getting all their news from the Daily Show. It's like the influence of that should outweigh, you know, some of these other right-wing fringe things. And I'm very curious.
How about social media?
Social media, another one. It's so I think that, like, at best, even if we were to give some of the assumptions that Justin was talking about, like, even if we were to give them complete benefit of the doubt, it is still a completely inaccurate and misleading picture. And the last thing I'll say, and I'll throw it back to Justin before his computer cuts out again, is like, does this even like have to go any further than just like the first 5 seconds of that CNN clip where the CNN anchor was almost surprised to hear the outcome of this study? It's like the surprise alone should nullify this study, period, because this is trying to measure perception. And if the perception is that the media is hard against Trump and soft on Biden, then I don't care what the study is that shows that it's actually the opposite of that, because the perception is what's important here. It'd be like a study coming out and saying like, oh yeah, you know, the sky is actually green, despite what your eyes tell you that it's blue. No, it's green. It doesn't matter. It's blue. Everyone knows it's blue, and everyone knows that the media is hard on Trump. This is a stupid study. That's the last thing I have to say about it. Justin?
Yeah, I mean, I think the influence factor is a huge part of the study. I would like to know how they measure the difference between some right-wing blog and the New York Times. I think that the use of words is also important. You said that there is some build-in for that, for weighing the severity of words, but how many articles in the New York Times that suggest that Trump is a fascist?
Right.
Do you have to have, like, how many articles that say Biden is bad, or the economy isn't doing so well, or that Dems are in trouble? How many of those equal one New York Times article about Trump being a fascist?
Exactly. That's
like
why
1,000?
This is all
like,
arbitrary.
That's why it's so stupid.
That's why it's so arbitrary. It's all over
Yeah,
the place.
so
Because that's they're trying to make this look like an objective study, but that's inherently subjective.
Right. So the most important thing, though, is why are they doing it, as Chris said before. And the reason they're doing it is because they literally have run out of other excuses for why Joe Biden is not being celebrated in the streets like he's the second coming of Barack Obama. Like, why doesn't everybody love him? He's, Scranton Joe. Everybody loves Scranton Joe, right? He got the most votes ever in history. Can you believe that? This is the guy who's gotten more votes than anybody else in history, supposedly. And we're supposed to, he's within 8 months destroyed his legacy somehow. And that if we're to believe that he was as popular as the media claimed he was when he won the election, then how is it that he's fallen from grace so fast? They have to have an explanation.
Yeah.
And the explanation can't be that he's terrible. Because if that's the explanation, then they totally undercut their entire movement. That can't be the explanation. So we need another explanation. It can't be that the media is all run by right-wing people, because we all know that that's not true. So the only explanation that they can come up with that's left, because they've shot all the other bullets wildly in the air like a psychopath, they're all gone. The only thing that's left is we're too hard on him. And the best thing about that excuse is it's sort of like they're patting themselves on the back while criticizing themselves at the same time.
Yeah.
It's like, you know what? We're really tough on presidents, maybe a little too tough on presidents. Maybe that's the problem. And so it's like, they have this sick, distorted view of, at best, if I'm just believing that Dana Milbank's an honest person, and I don't, I think he's a liar, but if we assume he's an honest person, at best he's wildly delusional and should be put into some sort of facility at best. At worst, he's a horrible liar who is doing this deliberately to try to create this narrative that will protect Joe Biden, the only narrative that's potentially left for Joe Biden. But people are not going to buy it. The reality is he's a failure, and we all know it.
We should look into that fiscal note or whatever company that did it and see if they actually did this research or if it's just Dana Milbank scribbling on his walls with no, this proves it. This proves it.
literally, just to and one last final thing. I mean, I Googled Trump fascist. That's it. In the news section of Google News.
And your computer crashed. That's why you keep dropping in and out of the podcast.
Probably. There are just like a million. There's a million. So the very first one that pops up is from New York Magazine. And it says this: if Trump voters lived in Germany, they'd be in the fascist party. That's the headline. Show me the comparison of that headline. Show me the counterpart of that headline in Fox News.
Right.
Like, show me the Fox News headline. Fox News has lots of bad headlines about Joe Biden. Is there one that suggests that everyone who votes for Biden is basically a neo-Nazi? No, there's nothing like that. Nothing.
Or a flag-waving communist.
Yeah, go ahead.
Or even a communist.
Yeah, use the mainstream media's formulation of fascists on the right and communists on the left. Yeah, where's the headline that says that everyone who voted for Biden Harris is a commie? Because there certainly are. You could make the argument in the media the way they used to make it for Trump that they're ruling like commies. They're making dictates and policy off the top of their heads that are supposed to try to apply to everybody on vaccine mandates and everything else. And again, Justin, like you said, it's not just that they're being tough on they're supposedly being too tough on Biden. As you said, they they say that maybe what did you say? It's like, maybe we haven't been hard enough on presidents.
Right.
That's something they should have thought about around maybe around the second term of Obama. that they were not being hard enough on presidents, because again, we're supposed to forget that the mainstream media basically worked as the PR arm for Barack Obama, and everything he did was awesome, and he was almost never criticized. That I think, famously, a Saturday Night Live writer said, "We can't do jokes about Obama. He's like obsidian. We can't get our fingers in there to criticize him and have any humor at his expense." I mean, the gaslighting here by our media and ruling class is just off the charts.
Yeah, I'll be very curious to see if this is the narrative that they really do try to push because of the elections coming up. And this is trying to, like Justin was saying, explain away just the terrible job that Biden has been doing and just write it off as, oh, no, it's just the media being hard on him. I'll be very curious because, like, honestly, I know I have friends and family that are pretty hard left, and I don't even think they would buy this. Like, it blows my mind that this is even it's even published on the Washington Post. Like, it's just like the editor should have been like, this is a little too ridiculous. We're not doing it.
Since I was going to bring this up, but since you mentioned that, I went to a dinner party type thing around a campfire the other day, and as Donnie knows, like the vast majority of people in my personal life are essentially followers of Mao Zedong. So it's a real problem that I have. Yeah, it's a real problem that I have. I'm surrounded by socialists and leftists. Some of they're all amazing people. They're just wrong about everything. But Joe Biden came up kind of in passing. Now, I never say anything about politics when I'm around these people. Well, not never, but usually I don't say anything about politics. Okay. They all know how I feel, and they all decided that they're going to talk about it around me anyway. And, but they brought up Joe Biden the other day. Now, these are all Democrats. Okay. They're all Trump haters. They're all people who would probably say that Trump is a fascist. Okay. They don't, or most of them, they don't like Trump. They voted for Biden. And one of them in passing, one of the most liberal ones in passing said, because they were talking about age and whether you can be too old to do certain kinds of jobs. And somebody brought up that Joe Biden is president of the United States. And, maybe that's a problem. And the first thing that came out of someone's mouth, again, hardcore Democrat, voted for Joe Biden, is, well, can't we all just agree that Joe Biden is basically demented? And everyone said, yep. Yeah, we can. Sure. Of course. And there was nobody that defended him. Nobody that disputed it. Nobody that had any problem with the fact that the president of the United States is mentally, losing it, and that they all accepted this. They're all fine with it because Trump's gone, and that's all that really mattered to them.
That's the most important thing.
But the point is, the idea that the media treatment is unfair and that there's all these Democrats out there who are just, no, I mean, look, people know, even on the left, people know Biden's a disaster. They all know it. They may not say it openly all the time, but they all know that it's a disaster. So there's nothing biased or wrong about capturing the general mood that a president is a train wreck when he is, in fact, a train wreck. I think it should be more negative.
We should stop calling him Uncle Joe, and we should start calling him like Great Grandpa Joe or something like that.
Yeah, and your friends know that Joe Biden is demented. Those were their words, not mine. Despite the fact that the media has not reported on that. That's actually a pretty big story. There should be lots of takeout pieces about in the mainstream, in the big prestige media, about what's going on with Joe. He's shuffling around like an old man, at a nursing home. He's being led around by his arms, and he looks confused. He can't hardly read a teleprompter anymore. No, there's no stories like that. But guess what? People actually see it with their own eyes, and they're not morons.
No, a study shows that he's actually doesn't have any dementia, and he's perfectly functional human being. Yeah. New Dana Milbank piece that's coming out this week. All right, we got a hard transition to this other topic because we've only got like 10 minutes left. But Justin, you wrote a piece, a short policy brief that is titled "Measuring the Effects of Republicans' Tax Cuts and Jobs Act on Income Taxes." So Justin, during his normal routine of just digging through IRS data, came across something that he thought was interesting. So he decided to write a paper about it. Take us through it, Justin.
Yeah, that's sort of right. I actually had this idea for a paper. I've been waiting for this IRS data. It shows you I'm an even bigger nerd than what you just described. I've been waiting for this IRS data for like 2 years because I know the IRS is very, very slow at releasing specific income tax data about various income groups. And what I wanted to do was analyze the difference in what taxes people were paying, personal income taxes people were paying, and how much money people were making before the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. That's the Republican Trump-backed legislation that passed in 2017, and after the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act went into place. But because the IRS is so dysfunctional, it takes them years to release this data after these taxes are filed. So the 2018 data came out like within the past year. So this was finally, I had the opportunity to take a look at the 2018 data and compare it to the 2017 data to show how tax rates actually, how the tax cuts actually impacted the taxes that people were paying and whether people were getting wealthier or poorer as a result of it, right? So the numbers were absolutely incredible. What they essentially show, the sort of big takeaway headline is that middle income and working class filers, so not just individuals, but families too, because they could be a single filer, they were the ones that received the greatest benefits from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. They received the biggest tax cuts. Even though this was billed by Democrats as just a giveaway for the rich, a giveaway for the wealthy, that they were the only ones that were going to benefit from this, the data is absolutely 100% clear. And you can see it in the paper, the table that Donnie has up here. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll be able to see that the percent change in average taxes paid by each filer, that's the column all the way on the right, that shows you the change in the taxes that people paid on average in all of these income groups. It's all the way on the left-hand side here. So for example, in the $40,000 to $50,000 category, that's adjusted gross income, there was an 18.2% tax cut on average for the filers in that category from 2017 to 2018. So in 1 year, those people had an 18% tax cut. That's after you take credits and deductions and all that stuff into account. That's what they got. People who earn 25 to 30,000, a 20% cut. People who earn 75 to 100, a 15% cut. And as you go further down the list, generally speaking, it's not linear, but as you go further down the list and you get higher and higher incomes, the tax cuts that people got became lower and lower and lower. Now, everybody did get a cut. Every group got a tax cut. That was one of the big selling points of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. But you can see the people who benefited the most from it generally are middle income and lower income people, if you're looking at it as a percentage of the income that they saved in just 1 year. Yeah. The other thing that this shows is that the number of filers dramatically increased in the higher income categories, and that's upper middle income and upper income categories, and they actually decreased in the lower income categories. What that means is that people were moving out of poverty, moving into the middle class, and that there were people in the middle class moving into the upper middle class, and there were people in the upper middle class becoming wealthy, and so on and so forth. In other words, everyone was getting richer from this. Some of these groups increased by 1 million filers. I think the 100,000 to 200,000 was one of the ones that had that happen. So literally in 1 year, there were 1 million more people filing in the 100,000 to 200,000 category than there were in the previous year. 1 million more people. So that means that people are getting wealthier. So the tax cuts worked exactly as promised. The big promise was this was going to benefit everybody, but it was primarily going to benefit middle income people and working class people. And that is exactly what happened. Go ahead.
Chris, you wrote some op-eds about this too. What was the kind of the more surprising findings that you came across?
So I think Justin articulated the paper perfectly. And what I researched when I was doing the research on a couple of op-eds that I wrote, I looked back at the statements made by people like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer before the bill was passed.
Right.
I kid you not. Nancy Pelosi said it was the worst bill Congress would ever pass. That includes the Fugitive Slave Act. They said that it would rain down taxes on the middle class. They said it was a a windfall for the wealthy. It was just everything they said turned out to be the exact opposite based on facts and data.
Right.
So I was glad to go back and re-examine how much they lied, how much propaganda they were spewing, and how completely wrong and off base they were. We all, common sense tells us if you cut taxes for everybody, everybody's going to do better. It's not that hard. But they lied.
One of the comments that I remember hearing routinely when this was being proposed and passed and all of that was that the rich people were going to get all this money and the middle class were just going to get crumbs. And then this shows that, for this range over here, it's like 15%, 18% reduction in taxes. That's crumbs to them. But these are from people that would consider your entire income over the year crumbs. That's the elitist perspective of all of this. So the actual facts of what happened are this is my kind of overarching problem, I guess, is the facts will show this. You can see this. This is just IRS data. You're not putting your commentary in here necessarily. You can just look at these numbers, but the narrative from going on for years and years and years will still be that this was just a big handout to the rich.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to keep in mind too that when you see an 18% cut, that doesn't mean that person received 18% more money. It means on average, they received at least 18% on average. But if they moved up an income category as well as millions of people did, then they may have gotten 25% more money than they had before, or 30% more money than they had.
Well, got to keep what they earned. You mean, of course.
Well, I mean, in some cases they earned more money, so it would actually be they earned more and got to keep more of what they earned. So it would be both. So, but the bottom line is the tax cuts made everybody wealthier. The standard talking point, as Donnie said, is exactly right. But ironically, the Washington Post, we just talked about Dana Milbank, the Washington Post ran an article specifically about this paper that I did. And the headline was, we're going to pull it up here on the headline was, yes, the 2017 tax cuts helped working class Americans, but conservatives should be honest about how. So they don't, in this article, they mention the paper. They don't deny that they don't say the paper's wrong. They don't say it's really misleading or anything like that. They acknowledge that middle income people and working class people benefited from the tax cuts, which to me is shocking. I would have thought for sure they would have denied that. They didn't. They didn't even try. Instead, what they said was, well, the reason why was primarily because of child tax credit changes and things like that, which were part of the Republican tax law. So they are giving Republicans credit for that, but they're claiming that as sort of a liberal idea. And so we should be honest about why this happened. All the growth was because we gave people with children a little bit extra money in a tax credit. Well, that's the reason why. It wasn't one of the largest tax cuts in history for personal income taxes and for businesses and small businesses and corporations and all the rest. That had nothing to do with the job growth and the wealth being expanded. No. It was just giving people with kids a little bit more money. Not all people with kids, just some people with kids, a little bit more money. That was the primary reason all of this happened. Now, I have no doubt that helped some people, and millions of people even. But the idea that was the sole driver of all this economic growth is stupid. Of course, that's not what happened.
I've got a question for you, Justin, because this piece did really well. You wrote a couple of pieces that did really well. A lot of other people commented on this. There's been articles across the internet talking about this study. It's been retweeted by a number of people, politicians, that ALEC guy, Jonathan Williams, like a lot of pretty influential people have been talking about this. And I know that you've gotten a ton of hate mail, and we unfortunately aren't going to have a whole lot of time to get into any of that hate mail. But one of the messages in a piece of hate mail that you read to me, as well as a bunch of tweet responses when people are sharing this, is this idea that my taxes went up. I'm in the middle class and I got, this amount of return back before this act passed. And afterwards I got, taxed way even more. So are they just lying? Are they mistaken? Is there any credibility to some of these claims? What do you think?
Yeah. So whenever you pass a law, the way that they passed this, which was through budget reconciliation, which means they did not have total control over what was in the bill. They had to pass the bill in a certain way with certain rules and restrictions, fiscal restrictions in the Senate. It's not going to be exactly what anybody wanted. And some people probably did have their taxes go up, especially if they were upper middle income and they were heavily dependent on state and local income tax reductions, the SALT, what's called SALT. If they were heavily dependent on that, there are some people heavily dependent on other kinds of deductions. If they have no children, there's various people who might have their taxes increased. That's probably true, but it's a numbers game, right? The vast majority of people did not. The vast majority of people received a tax cut. That's what the data shows overwhelmingly. On average, most people in the middle class received somewhere between a 15% and 20% tax cut. That's the average. With that said, there's also a lot of people who are just confused, because what happened was they changed the tax withholding rules, how much they withhold from your taxes too. So they started withholding more money from people. So what happened was people weren't getting as big a refunds back when they got their taxes back. And now for a lot of people, that's how they measure how much they're paying in taxes, is what was my tax refund at when the IRS, in April or May or whatever, when they get their tax refund back, that's how they judge it. So if their tax refund went down, in their minds, their taxes went up, but that's not how it works. You shouldn't really, ideally, you shouldn't be getting a tax refund. You should be paying exactly what you owe to the IRS as the year goes on, and you don't get a refund at all. And you don't owe them anything at all. That's really what you should be shooting for. So when they changed the rules to try to make it so that was happening, some people who were getting big refunds because they were paying way too much in taxes throughout the year, they ended up spreading out what that refund would be over the course of the year by having a little bit higher paycheck.
Right.
And people didn't realize it and thought, hey, I'm paying way more in taxes, when in reality, they were paying the same that they were before, or maybe even less. And it just looked to them like they were paying more because their refund had gone down at the end of the year.
Right.
So that's a problem politically. And Republicans should have been smart enough to realize that would have been an issue. But that's not indicative of your taxes actually going up.
Right.
And it would be really easy just to check your tax return from one year to the next to see how much you paid in taxes.
Right.
But a lot of people don't do that. They don't think about it. They just want to know what their tax refund is going to be. And so
I get that. That's an issue that I have to deal with on social media every year. People so excited to get their tax refund back when they're just basically giving an interest-free loan to the government. Jim, you weren't given the ability to talk over this last 10 minutes or so while we're talking about this. I'll give you a final word. Any comments you have about this paper or anything like that before we start wrapping up the show?
No, I applaud Justin for producing the paper, and people can go check it out at heartland.org. There's a feature right on the front page so the people can check it out for themselves. And if you look at the charts, it shows again, because it's very easy to show this because the data shows it to be true, the wealthiest people in this country pay the vast majority of the income tax revenue collected by the federal government. I think the top two categories of income level are responsible for something over between 50 and 60% of all federal tax revenue brought in. So the idea that the wealthy are not paying their fair share, and this is even after the Trump tax cuts, right? So this is after they've had their income taxes reduced. And again, as Justin said, that allowed a lot of movement up in the income categories throughout the entire American society. But it is the wealthy who pay, frankly, more than their fair share. If there was a flat tax across the board, I think everybody might have a more even and more interested stake in what tax levels should be in the United States. But it isn't. The wealthiest pay the vast majority of the tax revenue brought in by the federal government, and people should remember that. But yet the Democrats still are always demonizing the rich. There's something wrong with being wealthy, but they pay their fair share anyway.
Donnie, Democrats should love Justin's study because it also shows that total tax returns went up. And isn't their overall goal always to maximize total revenue to the government? So we do know, and this has happened with the Ronald Reagan tax cuts. When you cut rates, you get more economic growth, more economic activity. You get more total revenue.
Yeah.
Well, I had that one idea that I talked about on this podcast before, when instead of having like money withheld by the government, you should like have it put into a like specific savings account just to pay your taxes at the end of the year, so that at the end of the year, you literally have to write a check to the government from that little special savings account. And I think people would really realize the weight of the government on their shoulders if you had a system like that.
That's how it used to be before World War II, when FDR came up with the withholding scheme.
Right. Well, but actually, I never heard of that idea. That's a good one. If there's withholding, but you still have to write the check yourself at the end of the year. In other words, your employer will put it aside, but the federal government doesn't get it until every quarter. You have to write the check and send it in yourself. That would make a huge difference.
But not only that, but you would earn the interest on it while it's sitting in that little account over the course of the year. But anyways, we're already 5 minutes long. Thank you all for tuning into this episode of the In the Tank podcast. Join us every Thursday. If you're listening to the audio only, you're probably listening to this on a Friday, but you can join us a day earlier. Watch us live on Thursday on YouTube and Facebook. You can join in the conversation, send us your comments and questions. Maybe we'll put the comments on the screen. Maybe we'll answer your questions during the broadcast. If you like our show, please subscribe, write a review for us on iTunes. It'd be greatly appreciated. Make sure to subscribe to this channel on YouTube if you're watching us. If you'd like, you can follow us on Twitter at InTheTankPod. You can send us your comments, questions, suggestions for the show by emailing us at inthethankpodcast@gmail.com. Justin Haskins, where can the fine people find you?
They don't need to find me. They need to find Hillary Clinton's masterclass, which they can find at masterclass.com/classes/Hillary-Rodham-Clinton-teaches-the power-of
Bleach pit.
resilience.
Resilience.
Jim Lakely, same question.
You can find me on Twitter at @JLakely. You can find the Heartland Institute at Heartland Inst, and always visit heartland.org.
Fantastic. And Chris, you are a ghost when it comes to social media, so just join me in saying goodbye to the fine people.
Have a great weekend.
All right. Thank you all for tuning in. We will talk to you next week.